They're twisting the text. They are trying to conceal its true meaning. We've heard, but their edits are shallow. The truth will out someday.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And we are here with the Quranic Inquisition. And today we're going to obviously continue where we left off with our fantastic panel with Odon, JC, and Usama Dakdok to talk about, is it Jesus or is it Muhammad in the Quran? And I think the evidence is becoming very, very clear. There's too many parallels, but also, of course, this research has created a great deal of controversy and misrepresentation of the argument, but let's not get too much into that right now. So welcome, guys, and welcome back. Usama, you are kind of new to this. I mean, you're a neutral party. Everyone likes you. You're a smart guy. You're a funny guy. You're my friend, my special friend. Everybody's...
And listen. When I said you're my special friend this morning, I really mean it, okay? This time, I really mean it.
No, but this... He really means it. Thank you very much, Usama. And tell me something. What makes you interested in this topic? I mean, for you, it was something brand new a couple of weeks ago. What made you decide this is worth investigating?
Let me put it this way. I will live to learn, and when I quit learning, that's when I'm dead, unless I'm becoming arrogant and so prideful. I'm not going to be. I hope and I praise the Lord will not make me arrogant. So keep me humble and learn. The idea of Muhammad, which I studied all my life, the normal story of the Mecca, Medina, back to Mecca. It's kind of, this year have some holes in it. I mean, literally big holes. So I'm glad that some other people digged into it and seek the knowledge. I am not saying that I'm not believing that there was Muhammad, as we just mentioned a minute ago, but the idea of Muhammad of Mecca, it does not really hold water, that in the specific years, in the specific time, Muhammad, and no, by the way, it's not just the contradiction in that Muhammad story. It is the history of the Quran. It is the history of Islam. Nothing we learn about Muhammad or Islam except there's always disagreement among Muslim scholars. So, did he went through all that which the normal study we talk about in Egypt, or we have the other stories which I discovered later as I went on? So it's a problem. It's a problem. And the more we dig in, the more I will come with my conclusion soon, not later, I hope. That I will give you my full theory about the idea of Muhammad ibn Abdullah, the man whose father died 3 years before he was born. I mean, literally, the whole thing is like a comedy from beginning to end. If Muslim believes that Abdullah is the father of Muhammad, that itself caused me to doubt the whole story a good, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when I discovered that Abdullah died 3 years before Muhammad. Obviously, there are Muslims who believes that a woman can be pregnant. According to the scholars of Islam, the four schools of thought, the Hanbali and Shafi'i and Ahmadi and all this wonderful Muslim, whatever he calls them, that, yeah, a woman can be pregnant 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years. So if you believe in that, everything goes. No problem whatsoever. Anyway, so that's my simple thoughts about the topic.
Right. And I mean, we can see the parallels, and I think there are certain passages that just are clearly just, I mean, Muhammad doesn't even appear in his own book. Jesus appears 30 times more, and then Moses appears like, I don't know, 50 times more. It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the name Muhammad, yeah, but you, the Y-O-U, is all over the Quran. And scholars will tell you, you here is Muhammad. We is Allah speaking to you, Muhammad. So you find lots of you in the Quran. I don't know the exact number, but it's that's another mystery. The Quran
Yeah, I don't know
changed it.
that. Did Allah send down brackets along with the golden text from paradise?
There was no bracket at the early days of Islam. No.
Odon, welcome back. What are your thoughts?
Hello, everyone. I fully agree with Osama, and I was about to say what he just said. There is no clear mention of Muhammad in the Quran, and moreover, the 4 mentions Muhammad and Ahmad mentions. Most probably, there are late additions to the text. I already said it in previous streams.
Right.
But the thing is, as Usama said it, if we read the Quran for what is literally written in it, we see that many times it looks like instructions. Someone gives instructions to someone, and that someone is supposed to preach the discourse that is being instructed. So maybe we can, if we read thoroughly, we can get some clues about the people that are being instructed, and they might have been the historical Muhammads.
Right. And JC, welcome. What are your thoughts, JC? Because you're the one who's taking this particular idea, this literary analysis as an author, as a fiction author, and reverse engineering or deconstructing how these religious texts were used and modified to create this new narrative. And you've caused a lot of problems, okay? You've caused a lot of arguments. I expect some kind of apology from you.
Yeah, my dog will not talk to me anymore. My own dog. I mean, hello.
This is only the beginning. Well, first, Lloyd, thank you very much for hosting, and Odon, Usama, it's lovely to speak with you guys again. So my view is exactly what you guys have said, like very similar. I think everyone at one point believed in the narrative. Some people still do. And then at one point or another, for different people, different times, we would find something that really doesn't make sense. And we think, no, there must be something else to this story. And then we dig into it. The problem is that when you do that, then you find more and more problems and the whole thing collapses. So at the moment, everybody is analyzing everything, all the scriptures and the hadiths, coins, inscriptions. I'm actually just looking at the Quran and saying, I'm not going to take anything for granted, because the people who has told us what those verses mean, they were liars.
Well,
so if somebody says, in here it says, you, that is Muhammad, it's like, okay, let me read the verse and see if it's describing Muhammad or if there is something else going on. So that's all we do. We just look at the Quran.
You know, I think we all agree that when we read the Quran in the sense that Odon first described it, and now with your layer, that lens that we're looking at it through, the Quran seems to make a lot of sense. It actually seems to make then a coherent story that continues at least in a vaguely Christian tradition. It does seem to hang together with previous Christian traditions. It may be heterodox, sure, but then it seems to make sense. But Usama, I mean, we've done what, 38 episodes now on the Quran and Tafsir, and that has been a riot.
And we're not digging deep, brother. I mean, there's so much stuff we left behind, because if I will follow the writings of Ibn Kathir in his book, Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, the beginning and the end, the story of the Prophet, Qisas al-Anbiya, Lord have mercy, we will still be talking about that.
But we see that the Quranic story is incoherent. It makes no sense. It makes assumptions. It makes jumps. It has huge gaps. The Tafsir has to fill in gaps that the Quran leaves empty. Otherwise, you have a completely incoherent story that cannot support its origin and cannot support its continuation.
You're absolutely right. And by the way, this will carry on all the way until we get to the last chapter of my book, volume 2, which is about Muhammad. Even the story of Muhammad is actually, wait a minute, the story of Muhammad is actually worse than that which is written about the rest of the prophets, which Muhammad mentioned earlier. I mean, think about it. It does not, I mean, it seemed to me, Muhammad, in his own teaching in the hadith, assured us that his mother and his father are burning in hell. But somehow, when you read the story about the birth of Muhammad, the light came out of her mother, and the light, first of all, the light came out of the father to Amna, and the light came out of Amna when Muhammad was born. It's like, hello, why not Amna became a Muslima? Why not Abdullah became a Muslim? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
He curses his family. Yeah. Yeah, just so you know, before part 2, I'm going to join the witness protection program and change my name, okay? It's just so you know. Odon, just to protect my sanity. Odon, what are your thoughts?
I have many thoughts on the topics. One that comes to mind because I am reading this huge book, The Muhammad of Historians, which is a sort of follow-up to the Quran of the historians that has been published in French. So there are 2 huge books with something like 40 academic studies about the depiction of Muhammad, studies about Muhammad in the Quran, and so on. And one thing that comes to mind is that among knowledgeable scholars, they all know that there is no historical Muhammad. They all know that the prophet, the story, the character of the prophet of Islam is an invention. They all know it.
So why is this cool? I believe you. I mean, academics must obviously be able to see this story makes no sense. But why has there been such a backlash, at least from the YouTube community? I mean, why is there such a backlash, do you think?
Because it might. I won't blame it on the academics, but they haven't built on this discovery. They know that the Islamic character is false, but they do not dare to replace it with their own hypothesis, and so there is a sort of blank that is filled by us, that is filled by our work, by the work of independent researchers.
So scholars didn't want to touch it, so they've left it open to us, and we're the ones that are now. So we've taken the opportunity. Do you think there's that we have? I mean, you could dismiss us all as amateurs, but I think we've all been very thorough and loyal to the source material. And I think we've been very detailed and honest and open and upfront about our research. But I mean, there are others on the other side of the fence. You know, I just find it strange, and I don't buy their arguments, because evidence like the coins, the maps, the lack of archaeology, all of these things, you know, these can't just be dismissed.
And the convergence of all these clues.
Yes,
we see no divergent clue. Bring me a coin with Muhammad Rasulullah from 635, for example. That would be very hard for me to explain.
Mm-hmm.
But there is none.
At least, you know, here's a fact. One of the reasons which make me strong in my belief in the Christian faith is that the writings of those who hated Jesus, the writings of those who did not like Christianity, about the truth of my Christian faith. So it's not just the disciples write to us about Jesus. How about the philosopher or the writers or the historians write about Jesus? How about the people who did not like Jesus write to us about Jesus? Mm-hmm. So you cannot deny there was a guy by the name Jesus. I don't know how you believe about him. Is he the son of God? He's a fraud. He's a blasphemer. He's whatever. But there are plenty of material written. Where is this material was in the case of Muhammad?
There is some. We have some external sources about the leader of one of the Arab factions. We have the Chronicle of Sebeos. We have the anonymous fragment, for example. We have the Doctrina Jacobi. But the thing is, they do not describe the Prophet of Islam. And that's the main difference with the literature about Jesus. When the Jews wrote about him in the Talmud, they did not deny he existed. Such as the Romans, for example, the earliest testimonies of Christianity and the existence of Christ. Excuse me, Usama?
Like Tacitus, the Roman.
Yeah, for
historian
example. And what is being written about Jesus converges with the Christian narrative, whereas the external sources about early Islam do not converge with the Islamic narrative. They depict, for example, a leader named Mahmet or Mahmad, not Muhammad. This is something to consider, for example. They depict a leader who was urging his followers to conquer the Holy Land, not Mecca.
Right.
And there are some huge historical events that are not taken into account by the Islamic narrative, such as the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Which is something of who should have had an enormous impact on the narrative, but it's not even there. There's only the mention that a companion of Umar, when he took Jerusalem, asked him the permission to build a synagogue on the Temple Mount.
Right. Yeah, JC, let's go over to you, and then we'll jump into the research. Your last thoughts, JC.
Well, I think we can all agree that there are holes in the narrative, and yes, there was someone, at least someone, probably more people that, as described in the Doctrina Jacobi by Sebius and so on, there was someone. But in order to find out what that person was preaching, what was even his beliefs, his religion, we have to go to the Quran, to the Hadith, and to all of those sources. Now, the Hadiths, of course, are being just discussed by everybody. Now I'm just looking at the Quran, and one of the examples that we have covered before is the Quran says in 3 different places that Jesus died, and Islam says that Jesus didn't die. Therefore, if there was a Muhammad, he could not have been the prophet of Islam, because that would have made him an apostate. So just by looking at the book, we will find out some clues, and hopefully we can put that together with everything else that we find and come up with what happened some 1400 years ago.
Right, and upset a lot of people along the way. So let's dive in. Over to you, JC.
Okay, great. So I've just used this thumbnail that you used last time, simply because otherwise it
awesome
breaks the next slide.
Well done. Good choice.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So here we go.
It doesn't have Usama's picture on it, because I had that there too,
Yeah. So this is something we've discussed before. The Yesmos, those who say that Muhammad existed, they actually think that the Quran is from the right period, in the right language, it was produced en masse, and it was in the right region. So we can say, fair enough. Therefore, the Quran should tell us if all of those stories about Muhammad are about him, and therefore, fine, he existed. We cannot disprove it. Or if those stories told in the Quran about Muhammad, if they are not him. So with that in mind, we've been covering this thesis now in a number of episodes, which is we have the bottom layer in the Quran is what is written in the Arabic. And that says that Jesus died and resurrected. It says that Jesus is God. That text actually affirms the Trinity, and it has no idea about a guy called Muhammad walking around in Mecca. That is what the text says. And of course, we've unpacked a lot, and we will be unpacking more. There is, for anyone, it should be a huge red flag that Muhammad is meant to be mentioned only 4 times in his own book, just like Lloyd, you said earlier. It makes no sense. In the traditions, he's described as a megalomaniac.
I also think, how can we talk about a man that lived in a place that has no archaeological record? And in fact, if you look at like the 13 most attested locations in Saudi Arabia, not one of them is Mecca.
And it only appears once in the book, because if it appeared a lot, you would think, okay, there you go. But only once, and there is no archaeological finds. The logical conclusion should be, okay, so that meant something else, and it is a mistranslation. They created the story later. They created the city later, or they renamed a little shrine that was already there. That would be the logical conclusion. After all, the tradition said that Muhammad spent 10 years in Yathrib, and in all of that time, only one revelation came up with that name. It makes no sense. And also, Mohammed, he's described as a narcissist in the traditions. He would insert his name everywhere and it would be very detailed. So those are huge red flags. If we were to take the book, translate it literally, and give it to someone who has never even heard about Islam and they read it, they wouldn't understand a single thing. After the thing, if you said, okay, so what do you think about Makkah? They would say, is that in the book? I don't recall. And if you say, so what do you think about Muhammad? They will say, who is Muhammad? This book is about Moses and Jesus because he's not mentioned. They would be very confused. And what adds to the confusion is the top layer. This is the tafsir layer. They have been pointing at verses and saying, okay, this is all about Muhammad. And what I'm doing is pointing at those verses and saying, certainly not Muhammad.
But then also look at Mel's research. Muhammad, if you go back, I mean, I covered it in monotheism like 2 or 3 years ago. The earliest references to Muhammad are references to either God or Jesus. And these are Ethiopian references from Abraha and so on. So you got these inscriptions from Abraha from the 400s, which point straight to God the Father with his son Jesus called Christos. And that's in Mecca, and then that's in Arabia, just in the region of Mecca.
Yeah, which probably as well points to if there was a Muhammad doing these things in Mecca, if there was even a Mecca, which there wasn't, he wouldn't be able to get away with it. That region had been Christianized. They would have known that he's speaking absolute nonsense. But that's why they will say, no, it was pagan lands. No, it wasn't pagan lands. It was Christianized. So,
actually, the majority is Jewish. Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
Usama?
A quick thought I'd like to share. You know, the longer we go on in time, the easier, the faster the fame of somebody would be. So if we are 1,000 years before Christ, yeah, maybe people heard of David or not heard of David. I mean, David was a famous guy, even though some deny that he did exist, but we have the evidence of it. But you go to Jesus' time, it took some time for the news about Jesus and Christianity to spread, but obviously persecution helped it to spread a little bit faster. But you go to Muhammad 600 years after Christ, you should have him become a famous guy in much less time than that of early people, early famous people, early important characters. Why we need to wait for 10, 20, 30 years to learn about Muhammad, even though that took place 600 years after Christ? It could be, should be a lot faster, especially with the explosion the Muslims are teaching us. I mean, they are telling me in my textbook in Egypt that they moved from Saudi Arabia to Egypt 641. So literally 11, 12 years after Muhammad died, and Egypt became a Muslim country. So that huge jump from Mecca to Egypt and to take over the rest of the known Muslim world within few years after the death of Muhammad should made Muhammad very famous around 641, at least in the Muslim world.
But in the 700s, no one had heard of Muhammad.
Exactly.
That makes no sense. Makes no sense.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. So what we discussed in previous episodes, Usama, if there is something here that you don't like, maybe you haven't actually seen these arguments before, we've covered them. We can discuss any time that you like. But some of the things are, so Al-Isra, the night journey, Surah 17, verse 1, is not about Muhammad, is all about Moses. The Surah 97, the whole thing, the night of Al-Qadr, nothing to do with the Quran being revealed or descending from one heaven to another, is the birth of Jesus. And we know as well that the moon is split. That is in the book. It says the hour has drawn near and the moon has split. But there are no stories written about that until much, much later. So we know that they were creating hadiths trying to put Muhammad into the book.
Yeah. Ibn al-Qais wrote poetry 35, 40 years before Muhammad, quoting the same verse, when Shaq al-Qamar. So the split of the moon was known about. As a matter of fact, the daughter of Ibn al-Qais came to Muhammad and she told him, this is, according to the scholars writing, Muslim, this is a statement you take from my father's writings.
Yeah. And then also the Burak story comes from the 800s from a poem, and it's attributed to Abraham. So the Quran wasn't written in 625 or 638. When aspects of it are written 2 centuries later.
Yeah, well, I hate to jump, but when the thought comes to my head, I don't give it out now. I'll not remember it later. In the story of Joseph, Quran chapter 12, Joseph was sold for few of dirhams. Dirham as money did not exist in Muhammad days. As a matter of fact, in the story of the cavemen, you're talking about go with your paper. You talk about money made out of paper. Paper money was not invented by the Chinese for hundreds of years later. So how can you have these verses in the Quran about not silver, but dirhams, not about just money, but paper money? Somebody play with the Quran hundreds of years later. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the 750s when the dirham was first used, I believe. So this is 120, 130 years after Muhammad dies.
But whatever the date is, I know for sure.
Yeah. So the Quran, I mean, so this money comes more than a century after the death of Muhammad, when the Quran is already finished. So how do they include something from the future into this book? Odon, I think you want to say something?
Well, it was just about the split moon. What you said, Usama, you referred to some pre-Islamic poetry, which is part of the Islamic narrative. We have no mention of this Islamic poetry other than in the late Islamic narrative. And when you look at the verse, it's a very simple verse. The hour has come near. So it talks about the days last, the judgment day. And so it talks about the catastrophes and the signs there will be during this time. So there is nothing about a Quranic miracle or Muhammad having split the moon or something like this. It's just a prediction about the apocalypse. And at a later time, when the makers of the Islamic narrative needed their prophet to perform miracles, they looked in the Quran for verses that might fit a probable miracle having been done by their prophet. And so they selected this one and invented the prophet, the miracle of the split moon. And that was it.
I did this research about 20 years ago when I translated my Quran, and before verse 1 of Quran chapter 54, I wrote, Muslims claim that Muhammad divided the moon, but the infidels still would not believe. Actually, the verse does not say that Muhammad divided the moon, but simply that the moon is divided. Verse 1 is actually poetry written by a poet. His name is Imr al-Qais, who died in 540 AD. Notice Muhammad was not born until 570 AD, according to the Muslim historians' writings. So, somebody can correct my information here. I would love to hear the
you see the problem
These just big clues, because all of those things are actually pointing at what happened. And like Odon said, this is actually written later to make it about Muhammad. So we know that the text is there and it says one thing. In this case, okay, fine, we can say that it comes from some poetry, but it has nothing to do with Muhammad. And then later, people create not only the hadith, the whole isnad and everything, because they have to give him a miracle. So all of these things are very, very big clues. For me, when it comes to the moon split, I haven't found a single account of outside of the narrative of people saying, hey, we believe in our guy because he split the moon. You would think that is the first thing they would say when they encounter a Christian, because if Jews would say Moses split the sea, Jesus died and resurrected, and what they would say about Muhammad, he split the moon, the big, big sign. But it is not discussed outside of the narrative until much later. So we know the book is there at one point, and then later they're writing stories to make it about Muhammad. So
and here's the fact: we're talking about 30. The Bible recorded to us 31 miracles of Jesus. We have never discovered miracle number 32 years later, which means when Jesus performed these miracles, it was in his lifetime. People saw it, people believed it, and it's not like Jesus performed some miracle or he did something and then 500 years later, or maybe 1,000 years later, oh, here he is, Jesus did perform a miracle. No, what is the purpose of having a miracle to be performed if people did not see it and believe it on the spot? See it and believe it.
Good point.
It's the miracle of the Quran. It's the miracle of Biddah. So
Does it
And
change the argument any if people say, well, you see, actually, the story was known for 200 years, but it only got written down in 731 when they, you see, I mean, well, how does it change it? Because then how do we explain how the money got there, you know? But then I don't think that helps the case, because then you are adding stuff that happened more than a century after the death of the protagonist here.
yeah, and certainly it is clues that show that they were actually adding things and writing things into the book or on top of the book when they shouldn't have been. Some of those I try to stay away for the time being because maybe there's a problem with the diacritics and the actual Rasam said something else. Maybe it was changed later, but maybe it was not even supposed to say that at all. But we see more stories, like we've discussed as well before, that the Quran says very clearly that Jesus died. In 2 verses, it says that in the future tense, so it's pre-crucifixion, and in 1 verse is in the past tense, so post-crucifixion. And it says that he resurrected. So we know that the book, when it was written, it was saying these things, which they are 100% incompatible with Islam. So they have to create all of those interpretations to say, no, let me tell you what it means. And we've seen quite a bit of that. So the book says one thing, but then the traditions, they tell us something completely different.
Interesting. Or makes a very good point. With the Gnostic Gospels, which started to add lots of details and facts and so on, supposed facts, the church saw this as a problem because the canon was closed. So adding things a century later was a serious problem. And they said, no, that can't be, that has to be false. That's not part of the original story. Whereas clearly we've got stuff added 150 years later into the Quran.
Sure. Lloyd, can you bless me by reading Quran 931? And just a quick thought here about the true writings and how the Quran declared that Christ is to be God. That's a verse. Sadly, if my dear brothers here did not have it in my accurate translation, most likely they missed it. Most likely.
931. I'll do it for you now.
Yes, please.
Should I share my screen?
I know
just read?
I know it by heart. It's
Okay, I'm just going to share, and then you'll have to just reshare in a moment, right? Give me a sec.
It's a very powerful verse, like the verse in the past tense, 116, when you caused me to die. What it said here in 31?
They take their rabbis and their monks as lords rather than Allah and the Christ, the son of Mary.
Notice here, Allah and Christ to be taken lords. Not one other translation in the English language have put it right. They all lied. They all put Christ earlier or put Christ later and tried to separate. This is a very powerful verse. Dun Allah wal Masih Isa ibn Maryam. Wal Masih.
And they're not commanded to serve except one God. So you've got one God, that's Allah and the Christ. Yeah.
That's a big problem for Muslims who will be honest with themselves when they read. I know 5:16, when you caused me to die, past tense. Actually, that led my friend Mustafa. He used to be a professor at the Azhar University, and he used to be imam in Cairo, one of the mosques in Cairo. He became a Christian because of that one verse, the past tense of the death of Christ.
Yeah, and the Allah and the Messiah, that one is the only place where they actually have that. The thing is that every time when we see in the Quran, Allah and his messenger is the same. So when they were writing this, most of the work was always about Jesus. In all of those verses that talks about the messenger, they have really tried to push Muhammad into those verses. But the majority of them, if not all of them, are of course about Jesus. Is actually always associating Allah and his messenger, exactly the same as Allah and the Messiah. So, but yeah, the book says very clearly that Jesus is Lord. And we've seen as well, they call him the Word. He's the Word of God. And we've seen as well some of the Qira'at where they seem to have been hiding that as well. So we're starting to get a theme of what the Quran originally said before they twisted it as much as they could. And like Usama said, Surah 9, verse 31, every single translator will add a little line, a bracket, a space, another word. They will try to make sure that you don't see Allah and the Messiah together because it breaks the theology. Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So other things that we've seen before is the successful, according to the Quran, are those who are the Christians, those who follow Jesus. The verses that say something like, those who do whatever will be the successful, there are vague verses. Those are the ones that say, those who pray and do righteous deeds will be the successful. And it's like, fine, that's every religion that you can think of. But then the specific ones, every single time is Jesus. And the ones that we think, no, this is Muhammad because it says Allah and his messenger. If you unpack it, as we did one verse last time, it is very clear it was always about Jesus. So the book had this theme and it had no idea about Islam at this point when it was written. We saw as well that the messenger, the Ummi prophet, it was a description of Jesus, and also that the word Shekinah is very rebranded into the tranquility of Allah, because otherwise it gets too close to the Trinity, most likely. So we've seen plenty. For anyone who hasn't seen any of the previous shows, this is not about taking one verse and just looking at it and that's it. This is a compounded argument. It's about looking at hundreds of verses and we see the theme and we see exactly the lies and how they have changed things. So if someone is new to this and they say, oh, hang on a minute, they're just taking things out of context. Yes, look at the other 200 verses that we've discussed and we take it from there. All of those things that we see here is the Islamic narrative. It is not in the Quran. It is not the source. The people who have told us the stories, they were liars. That's what I want people to remember as we go on. They lied about what the book was saying. They created a fictitious story, and that fictitious story is what we read. So, for example, here, we have this verse, Surah 5, verse 46, gives the game away. It's saying that Jesus confirms the Torah, what came before him of the Torah, and also that he got the gospel, which confirms the Torah. Now, this verse should have been removed very early on, and they didn't. So now we can nitpick. Every time that the Quran says that something confirms something from before, in every single case, is Jesus confirming the Torah, or it is the gospel confirming the Torah? In every single case. At no point it is the Islamic Quran. There are a couple of verses that will mention the Quran. Those have to be unpicked. I've been working on those. And we're going to see some examples. Now, in here, this sentence here is Baina Yadeihi, which David Wood likes to talk about this one quite a bit, because it means he confirms what he has between his hands, what he has with him. There will be verses in the Quran that will say, and we sent it confirming what came before it. And we'll use this Baina Yadeihi expression. In those cases, he's talking about the word confirming the Torah. At no point is meant to be the Quran confirming what is between his two hands, whose two hands, and that is the Torah and the Injil. It's all rebranding. So for anyone who is working on this research, yes, remember, follow the money. In this case, Baina Yadeihi, it is actually used for Jesus. Something confirming what came before is nothing to do with Islam. This book is not aware of Islam. We have the same thing here. Surah 61, verse 6, Jesus against confirming the Torah. And then there is the whole thing about Ahmad, but you know what? We're not going to talk about that one today, so we can send it away. I'm just looking at the clock. So, and 350, the same. This is supposed to be Jesus speaking, confirming what was before him of the Torah. Fine. This is the theme of the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and
I have a quick question for you, brother.
Yeah.
What do you do with Quran 5:48, the following verse from 5:46 and 47? See, 5:45 talking about the Moses and the Torah, and if people don't believe in it, they become infidels, and it's have guidance and light. And anyway, and 5:46, 47 talk about the Jesus and the gospel, and then 5:48 speaking of Muhammad and his Quran. How do you address 548?
Oh, well, quite simply, because 546, so is this one, for 547, he's saying, "Oh, people of the Injil, follow what has been revealed to you." And then in the next one, it says, "So we have revealed to you the book in truth, confirming what came before it." So it's like, okay, so let's think this through. So we have verse 46 is talking about Jesus confirming the Torah and the gospel confirming the Torah. The next verse is talking about the people of the Injil. And then, as if by magic, we get to verse 48. And now we are 600 years in the future with Muhammad saying, not the Quran, but saying the Kitab bil Haq. It is all about Jesus. It is all about Christianity. This is supposed to be the, let's say, the preacher or the person speaking these words is establishing that Jesus confirms the Torah, and the Injil, which later is referred as the Kitab bil Haq, confirming the Torah. Then he's saying the people of the Injil follow the Injil. And then the narrator or the person speaking is saying, you follow the Kitab bil Haq, which confirms what came before it. The Kitab bil Haq, the gospel. What came before it? The Torah. And he says, as is faithful over it. The word is muhaymin. Is it muhaymin?
Muhaymin
Yes,
alayhi.
muhaymin over it.
Mhm.
So the Injil is muhaymin over the Torah. Muhaymin being from the word of faithful, which comes from Syriac, if I remember correctly, which means is faithful to the previous book. If it is the Quran, it just breaks everything. That's how I would interpret 46 to 48.
If I might add something here, there is a general meaning that comes out of those verses 48, 49. We see that let's say the person who is instructed by the we is being sort of tested. It seems that he lives in a sort of coexistence with Jews who abide by the Torah. But he, since he has the gospel plus the Torah, he is a bit different than the Jews. And it seems to me that the instruction is here to sort of make him understand that he is not like the Jews because he has the gospel. And since he has the gospel, he shouldn't fear to be confounded, to be seen as a Jew. You see my point? When you read the two verses, this comes to mind. So there is something of an historical context here where let's say the believers or the preacher and the believers were living in a very close vicinity or with Jews. So it might have happened during the conquest of Jerusalem around 614, or it might have happened elsewhere. But it's something to take into consideration, and this is why I think the text insists on having the gospel plus the Torah, or the Torah plus the gospel.
Yes, and when we are not really sure in this verse when it actually says, and we gave him the gospel. I need to actually, I can't remember if I checked the Kirat, but I actually still haven't even decided if by gospel, Injil, they actually mean the whole New Testament, or if they actually mean one gospel, which is the one that they have. So that's why I try not to get into those things. It's like, okay, let's try to keep it as open as possible, as opposed to narrowing it down. But certainly the conversation seems to be between Jews and Christians, and so far we haven't seen a single Muslim around.
Yeah. We talked to you and I, Lloyd, about the book, and we said there was no book in Muhammad days, period. So if we take 548 as Allah speaking to Muhammad, and to you we send the book, the Quran, there was no book in Muhammad days. Not the scholar of Islam could not tell us Muhammad received a book. That's a problem itself. What book are you talking about?
Yeah. What scripture?
Yeah. if we
scripture.
play it out,
The word
and we
in
might.
the book. Yeah. And as I always said, a book have a cover. A book in pages stick together, not a scroll. Not a scroll now. If you use a scroll, now you have a piece of paper. But even what I studied in Egypt in college or even high school, whatever early years, the Quran was written on a small, tiny piece of leather, wood board, bones, dead bones, shoulder blades, the leaves of palm trees. I mean, you're talking. There's no book.
Muhammad was taking 20% of all the booty. How did he not have the money to write a proper book?
No. I don't think if there was Muhammad, brother. If there was Muhammad, it would be so stupid of him to write his book in a book form. When you're lying, you don't want to record your lying. You don't want to make a video about it.
Fishermen, and they managed to properly write a book, or at least a scroll.
Yeah. There's something else about the meaning of the word book or kitab. Kitab in Arabic, it's not book per se, it's scripture, what has been written. And it is very close to the Hebrew katov, which is the same word, exactly the same word. And in Hebrew, we use the expression katov for scriptures that have become sacred. You see, for example, when a rabbi teaches, his students learn his teaching by heart, and as time comes by, his teaching is recognized as sacred, and then is put into writing, and then it becomes a kitab.
Kitab.
So you see the difference here. The kitab is something that is religion, that has become religion, that has been sacralized.
So they are using the word and they're giving it another meaning, and we're being distracted with this other meaning and missing that it's actually.
When we say book, actually, it's not really a book. It means a scripture for a religious instruction scripture that has been sacralized, such as the Torah, for example, or it could be also the Talmud. The Talmud is a perfect example of a scripture that has become sacralized. And in the Quran, the great offense that the Jews did is that they made the Talmud into kitab. They sacralized it. They make it an equivalent of the Torah, of God's word. If we...
something, I'm going to just hold that thought for one moment. Here's something that I'm not going to explain it very well, but I get the sense, and I spoke to JC about this, and it's very hard for me to explain this, but you just spoke of the Talmud, which is like an exegesis of the Torah, right? As well as an exegesis of the 632 mitzvot, the oral law, which ultimately is written down, right? But it's an expansion and application of that. I get the sense sometimes when I'm looking at some of these arguments and the way that there's more than one group that's fighting within this Quran. There's more than one group. At one point, it was with these guys. Another point, you had these guys. And another point, you had a different group. But one group seems to be, we only deal with the scripture alone, just the book. We don't need anything else. And another group wants to use secondary sources, right? So I get the sense there's a fight over an oral tradition group that needs to expand upon this and a group that wants to stick to this thing alone. And there's a friction between them because when you're working from the Quran alone, it's so vague, there's no way to explain things. And another group writes these additional secondary sources to try to explain some of these. And a third group came and had to merge these to make sense of it because you had the story with no justification, the guys who try to write the background, and then the third group had to merge these as one story. That's the sense I get. Usama and then Odon.
Yeah. Well, the Quran only people, they are the one who is embarrassed of the writings of their scholars.
Right.
They read it. It's not like they're not familiar with it. They read it and they are embarrassed, like, whoa, are you serious? Is that what Allah actually meant? Is that what actually Muhammad said? So what they do? So I don't believe in the scholars. I don't need Ibn Kathir, Al-Tabari, Al-Qurtubi, Al-Jalain, or Dawud, Damakhshari. I don't need these people. I can figure out myself. When in reality, he knows he cannot understand anything about it by himself. So you get to the mixed groups, like, well, here's the deal. I would take some of what the scholar said if it makes sense to me. Well,
So
good luck.
this is genuine sense of these three groups that it's just something that's been bugging me now for a couple of weeks. And I spoke to JC about it. Odon, what are your thoughts on this? Because someone had to harmonize and synthesize this mess. And that's the feeling that I have. I mean, it's what I'm kind of figuring out lately. Yeah.
Actually, I didn't get your point, Lloyd.
Oh, let me try again.
Your point on the three groups. What are
So
them
let
exactly?
me try to oversimplify here. One group has this book that's holy, the Quran alone, right?
Yeah.
And for them, this is everything. This is enough. The problem is it's not enough to explain its history, its origin. It cannot justify itself. Then you have a second group, maybe 20 years later, maybe a century later. I have no idea. But you have another group that comes along and goes, okay, we've got this core text, but we need to explain it and justify it somehow. We need to flesh this out. They write a bunch of secondary texts, right? Your tafsirs or whatever the heck, right? To try to explain this. Then a third group, and they make up a bunch of nonsense too. Then a third group comes along later and goes, okay, both of these have become canonical, but there's a conflict. We now need to harmonize and integrate this mess into a coherent story. That's kind of a sense that I'm getting based on the arguments that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think this process happens many times during the fabrication of Islamic narrative. But bear in mind that there was no corpus, there was no Quran before Abdul Malik. Before him, there were various collections of notes and manuscripts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only with Abdul Malik that they are merged together, that they are merged, edited, selected, edited, some of them modified a bit.
So think you have the Umayyads, then the Abbasids get demolished, and then the last group has to figure it out. Came the Ottomans, maybe.
But the thing is that for example, the early Umayyads, starting from Abdul Malik, they did not see the Quran as the Abbasids later saw it. For the Abbasids, the Quran was the support of the divine revelation that gave them legitimacy to total power, to the caliphate.
Yeah, this group says this is the divine word. We don't need to add anything to it. Stands alone. The other group says, yeah, we're going to need some context here.
Yeah. But, and besides, within the Abbasid regime, there was a core of Alids, a core of Shia Muslims. Let's call them this way. But even if it's a bit anachronicus, they were not called Shia Muslim at this time. But and so there were various factions within the Abbasid coalition. We are taught about the Mutazilit and Asharid factions, but also within the Abbasid coalition, there were people who believed that the revelation still there were still themselves
ongoing revelation,
the support of the ongoing revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So they might have had their own explanation for the Quran, which challenged the
So then someone had to harmonize this mess, and that was the last group. And I don't know which century that was, but some group had to come along and try and harmonize this nonsense.
But maybe it was even after the Abbasids.
Ottomans
No,
potentially.
it might be because the harmonization, when we really look into it, it came very, very late.
Agreed.
Bukhari's treaty, for example, Bukhari's hadith, we don't know that they were finished during Bukhari's time.
Yeah, Usama,
The earliest manuscript is something like 200 years older, younger, excuse me, than Bukhari's.
True, but then also we don't know when they were fully canonized. But Usama, do you have to leave early? You said you may need to leave.
I'll wait a little bit. flow a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Would you like to
It'll be
add
fine.
anything before I go to JC? Because I've got a question for JC after this.
No, we're good. We're good, brother.
JC Odon, Owa makes a good point here. When the Quran says gospel, Odon, I'd love to get back to that question a bit later, but yeah, that would be interesting to discuss. It says when the Quran says gospel, it may mean the four gospels, right? Because the main group that is in the Quran rejected the epistles; they are never referenced. So, JC, what is it that the Quran never references? What does it reference, and what does it not reference? Maybe that also tells us to what texts were extant or which group was active because they had leaned on a certain thing, and maybe we can trace that historically.
Well, I think we just see the name there, Injil, and nobody knows what it is. What is the Injil, right? The thing is, I'm doing sessions with our brother John, who is looking at the themes that we find in the Quran and interpreted them through the Bible. And so far, he has found the themes that we find everywhere, as well in the Acts of the Apostles, the whole Bible from Genesis all the way to the book of Revelation, like the
Really?
same themes. So I cannot say how much these people actually knew, but so far it looks like they knew more about Christianity than we give them credit for.
Okay, and the leanings are very Syriac Christianity, right? Because the language tends to lean Syriac. The leanings seem to be very Syriac church, like Nestorianism sort of leans in that direction, doesn't it?
Yeah, but we have to unpick more and more verses. A lot of these problems that we have in verses that they seem to point at Muhammad is because they try to put him into a verse, and in order to do that, they had to break the verse, and they do that with the diacritics. So once we understand the theme that is going on around the verses, is when we can say, okay, these three words really stick out like a sore thumb, and we can try to figure them out. And by we, I mean that should be a work for someone like Usama, who understands the language and can figure those things out very, very quickly.
A quick share here. The word Injil is written in the Quran 12 times. I don't have to quote you, trust me for that, but I got the location if you're interested. But the first time I have in my translation, I said it is actually a non-Arabic word of Greek origin, which means it's towards the gospel, the good news. That is the word Injil. And by the way, I believe Muhammad or whoever wrote the Quran does not know what the word Injil is, because Injil is Bishara. Bishara is Khabar Sar. It is a good news. It's a Khabar Mufrah. It is a joyful news. Hey, you got a son. Your son came back home safely. Something good. That is Injil, Khabar Sar. It's always good news. That's what it is. It's a Greek word. But if you listen to what how Muhammad used that word in the Quran, وَبَشِّرُهُ بِعَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, and give him the good news of a great torment. Man, how can you have good news of great torment? So actually, Muhammad used the word yubashir, which is a root of the word Injil. It's actually the verb of the word Injil, which gives the good news. He's saying it's just announce, let them know, informs them. No, that's not what the word. The word bashir, it is always gives a good news, give a joyful news, something real good, But that's not how you understand hell to be. Hell is not a good news. That's a bad news.
Yeah. I just want to mention something. I just want to go to Ethiopia for a moment. So the word Arabic Injil, now this is based on some research I did a couple of years back, so I can't remember it all offhand now. But it does resemble the Ethiopian word Wanjil, right? The word had already been introduced into Arabia by the Abyssinian Christians at the beginning of the 6th century. In fact, even sooner. The generally accepted origin is Greek, euangelion, good news, entering the Arabic via the Ethiopic wanjel. According to Arthur Jeffrey, the long vowel in wanjil, like the second syllable of Injil, is a very close resemblance, closer than the Syriac. So now you've got this Ethiopic link. So you have the Christian community in South Arabia at Najran, which was perhaps the oldest Christian community in Arabia, right? They were persecuted by the Jewish king Dunawas. I think he's a heterodox, as in heretical Jew, right? So many of them were Nestorians. Others were Monophysites from the Monophysite Church of Abyssinia. And in international trade, Abyssinia was a major source of trade. So I don't want to get too long into this, but Abyssinian, philologically, Ethiopic is the ancient language of Abyssinia. It is the most closely related to Arabic of all the Semitic tongues. Just as a basic fact here. Now, the contacts in Muhammad's lifetime are close, right? The southern portion of Arabia had been under Abyssinian rule. The Abyssinian army was dominant, right? They'd march with Abra. They took with them the full Abyssinian Bible. They had the full Coptic Bible or Ethiopic Bible at the time. So within the 3rd century, you actually had a full Bible from Ethiopia in Arabia, and this was the dominant military and economic force at the time. There were trade relations between Abyssinia and Arabia, right? Because they were the 4th largest kingdom in the world at the time, and so on and so on and so on. Just what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting theory.
And the word Tawhid, comes from the Ethiopic Tawahedo Church. I mean, the word Tawhid.
We already talked about it when we did a stream about the associationists, Mushrikun.
Yep.
I wanted to point out something else. Injil is a Greek word, and there has been
well, originally Greek, Evangelion, but it comes through the Ethiopic into the Arabic.
Because it's
it might have come through with by another way. You see, when Persia was evangelized, starting from the 1st century, there were still Greek cities in Persia, in the Persian Empire at the time. Greek cities that had been founded by Alexander the Great. So the evangelization of the Persians used 2 languages. It used Aramaic and it used also Greek. And so it might be a reason for the gospel being called Injil.
Yeah. And we have it in the Bible 68 times.
Yeah,
I mean, so it's not we know for sure it's a Greek word. Yeah.
And that's the very name of the gospel. Gospel is good news, good tiding in Aramaic. The early name, the very first name of the gospel is this, good news.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you have extensive known historical links to Ethiopia. I know that the northern thesis and the eastern thesis is very popular, but the fact is that Arabia is in Arabia, and we have extensive links to southern Arabia, and we have extensive links to Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So we know which people.
Early Islam was not did not happen in one place.
Yep.
It developed among various influences from Ethiopia to Persia to Jerusalem to Syria, and it cannot be that it happened only in one place.
Yeah, but it's just that because J. Smith cuts it off at 570 and moves north strictly, it kind of ignores anything that happened prior and anything south and west.
Yeah, exactly. And besides, things also could have developed independently, and then they could have merged. You see, for example, there might have been an Arab Christianity very influenced by Ethiopia in Arabia, and then influences from the north came, and the religion developed in a sort of melting pot, using influences from the north and from the south. Yeah,
I mean, trade routes would explain that. Trade was the internet of the day. It would be perfectly explained.
Exactly. That's the thing.
Yeah. JC, your thoughts? Odon and Usama?
We're doing good.
JC, back to you.
Yeah, I think figure out more things in the Quran, we will be able to see as well where they actually borrowed the stuff from. At this point, I would say they have some words that are Pahlavi and from all sorts. So certainly it is not very clear cut, and certainly a lot of Syria. But
yes. So is it just me, or are you breaking up?
He's breaking up. It's cutting bad.
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Am I back?
But that's also why, because you're back. it's not clear cut. This is why I have a problem with some other people, at least, who simply want to claim, yes, there was one guy called Muhammad. He was born on the 12th of February, 570 AD, and he died on the 9th of January, 632 AD, just after his 62nd birthday.
That bunch of the Muslims do not celebrate the birth of Muhammad. They say, actually, a large number of Muslims do not celebrate the birth of Muhammad. They think it's a no-no, like Jehovah's Witness does not celebrate Christmas.
What sad people.
Yeah.
They should send their Christmas money to me. I can use it very well.
I can use it.
I can do what the Red Cross does. I can donate 6% to charity and keep the rest for fees.
Anyway, well, since you have, I think I felt from your talk earlier that you gave me permission to leave. But would you please send me the link, because I really want to hear the rest of the conversation.
Guys, are we going to give Usama the link? I mean, are we going to let him leave?
Listen, you didn't hear me. I will send you one of those. Woo!
What's this?
Oh boy,
it's a donor? No.
$1,000.
If you're lucky, Usama, I send you one of these. This is 50
How much
million Zimbabwe dollars.
How much is worth? How much is worth in my US dollar? That's what I care about.
This is my retirement. I'm leaving this here on my desk for my retirement.
I tell you what, if it's worth more than $150, I will send you one of these.
Come on.
Look, here's the back. It's real gold, man. Look, shiny like gold. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Love you all. And I apologize for leaving early. I have to be at the shop in 20 minutes ago. Let me put it that way. But we'll catch up. We'll continue, but please send me the link, okay?
Send.
Nice speaking to you, Sam.
God bless you guys. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. God bless. Yeah, JC, back to you.
Well, I had just moved actually a slide that we're going to see in a minute for the benefit of Usama, because I think he would like that. So fine. Now, hopefully you will send him the link and he will actually pick up from here. So what we were actually establishing here is a theme. It is a theme that the Quran keeps talking about Jesus doing these things, confirming what came before it. And then they tell us when verses are saying that Jesus confirms the Torah, they change all of that and say, no, this is now Muhammad confirming the Torah and the Injil. And we're going to see that in a minute. But as it is now tradition, we see here on the very final line here on Surah 3, verse 50, Jesus confirming what was before him in the Torah, and then to make lawful for you some of what was forbidden. So something that only Allah can do. We have this verse in the Quran saying that Jesus did that, which of course, then they have to fix it. No, is God makes things lawful and unlawful. Jesus sends the message. It's like, no, this is Christian. And this is what we have seen already in every single show. I will bring this up every time where we saw Surah 7, verse 157, which is a total description of Jesus and nothing to do with Muhammad. It says, making things lawful and unlawful. So again, we see the themes repeating, and also we see how they try to hide things. They want this to be about Muhammad, and now you have something that Jesus does and is absolutely halal, which is making things lawful and unlawful. Now you have Jesus and Muhammad doing it, and they are also not doing it because it's only Allah. So you have to then reinterpret the whole thing. So anyway, we've discussed this one quite a few times.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie! 26 different Qurans!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
Stay away from these translations. They are propaganda.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?